And here we go. Her name, Grace, trended after the teenage was sentenced for not doing her homework. Outrage lit up social media feeds as the hashtag Save Grace hit and petitions followed on the color of change. She was uplifted, the plight of vulnerable and often erased from the justice conversation, girls. Today, we'll peel back the face of young girls in the juvenile justice system and how often they spiral and are forced into human trafficking. Hello, everyone. My name is Reverend Ray, and I am the Executive Director for PAC, which is People Acting in Community Together here in Silicon Valley. We are a multi-faith, multicultural organization of organizers who develop leaders to speak truth to power. We call to dismantle oppression for girls, and we stand to protect the marginalized. We push our county officials and police to not criminalize our young girls and to get on board to denounce the systemic racism and to construct a new social contract so that girls and women can thrive and enjoy quality of life. If you don't get the theme today, we are talking about saving our young women within a system that seeks to marginalize. And today we have some amazing young ladies here who are able to lift up this voice as civic leaders and community leaders to make sure that we are holding our stakeholders accountable. So at this time, I want to take the opportunity to welcome some amazing women that are doing amazing work here in Santa Clara County. And I want to start with Protima. I want you to introduce yourself, the organization that you work for, and what's motivating you. What is giving you fire during this pandemic, COVID-19, COVID period, COVID 45 period?
Thank you. First and foremost, it's a great honor to be able to stand here beside all of you. I rarely, as a system partner, get the opportunity to come to where our community is. And so I thank you for inviting me. My name is Protima Pandey, and I am the director for the Office of Women's Policy, Division of Equity and Social Justice, County of Santa Clara. And what is holding me today is the words of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She said, "Because you're a girl is never a good answer to anything." And I will carry that in the work that we're doing for women, girls, and gender expansive youth and individuals. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you and can't wait to hear your voice. Next on this amazing panel of women, we have Jessica. Jessica, introduce yourself to our Zoom group, our Facebook Live and YouTube group. Who are you? What organization are you representing today? And what is giving you fuel and gas and fire and motivation during this period?
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. My name is Jessica Nowlin. My pronouns are she and hers. I'm executive director at the Young Women's Freedom Center, and we work to build the power of young women, girls, transgender and gender nonconforming young people who have been involved in foster care, the juvenile justice system, and have lived and worked in the streets. And we do this work because we think we know if we want to build a different society where everyone has freedom and liberation, we need different leaders. And so our work is centralized in investing in these leaders. And what's really given me like fire and passion right now is really the young people in Santa Clara, in Oakland, and really across the nation, young Black and brown folks who are standing in power and really leading the way for us right now. And I'm just super inspired, and as hard and horrible as stuff is, there's so much hope.
Absolutely, there is hope, and we shall not render ourselves hopeless as we come together in solidarity and unity. This is what bringing collective leaders like this together is all about, so that we can hear from each other and learn from each other and then become one with each other. Thank you so much, Jessica. Next up is Julia. Julia, welcome. Please let the individuals who are watching with us live know who you are, what organization you represent, and what's gassing you and giving you fire during this pandemic period.
Great. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me today. My name is Julia Souza. I'm a supervising attorney at the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. I supervise our education rights team, and we defend students who have special needs in school and who are referred for expulsion, and make sure that students are able to stay at school where they want to be. I would say right now, what is inspiring me is the sort of what Jessica said, but the students who are rising up to take police out of schools. This has been an issue in our community for a really, really long time. We've had clients as young as 6 who were taken out of school by the police. And it's really inspiring to see the entire community get behind this effort, but especially the young people.
Thank you, Julia. And we're going to make sure that we put some information in the chat box so that they can follow you and follow all of you in the work that you're doing so that they can get the correct representation. Thank you so much for sharing, Julia. Last but not least, we have Stephanie. Stephanie, let the folks know who you are, what organization you're representing, and what is gassing you, what is motivating you during this COVID-19 period and pandemic that we're under.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie Aguirre, and I am a staff attorney at the Step Forward Foundation. We are a nonprofit in South County, based out of Morgan Hill. We provide family law representation, immigration representation, and employment law representation to people who have been victims of crime, including human trafficking. Our clients come from all ages. We have clients who are 2 years old all the way to up in their 90s. Sadly, it affects our entire community. What's really giving me hope during this time is going back to what Jessica was saying. You know, sometimes we are the first step of hope for a lot of clients, and just knowing that our work does make a difference and it can change their life, that's what gives me hope for the future. You know, life doesn't stop just because this pandemic has changed our world. Life keeps going, so we just gotta keep pushing, gotta keep fighting that good fight.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Listen, the work that you're doing is so critical, and it is only further exposed during times like this. So just like George Floyd, just like Black Lives Matter, we are going to hold people accountable. We will not let them look away, and we're going to keep our foot on the gas to make sure that our young sisters, the young ladies in our community, have the protection and the rights and equity that they need to live this life that we want for all as human beings here in Santa Clara County. So welcome, thank you. I'm excited to hear your voices. So before we jump in, I just want to pause and a moment of prayer, a moment of meditation, as we are grateful in the spirit of love that we're able to come together as advocates, as leaders, as leader-developed trainers in this county. So I'd like to pause and recognize all of those who have lost their life to COVID, all of our friends, our families, people that are near and dear to us. I want to recognize the life of leadership, that of John Lewis, the one who is willing to shed, have his blood shed, so that others may have the rights to vote, right to be seen as human, that forces our nation, forces stakeholders to open their eyes and to not be complicit and to speak justice in places where justice does not exist. We give thanks for voices. We give thanks for ears to hear. We give thanks to stakeholders who are sensitive enough to use their influence to listen to those who are marginalized, listen to those who are poor, listen to those who are disenfranchised, listen to those whose rights have been violated. So we stand in unity, but we rejoice because our hope says that together we win, together we're stronger, together we shall not be defeated. And I do this in the name of faith, called by many names, but the one that we love most is the name of love. Ashe. All right, so let me go back and recap. Stephanie, Julia, who has to leave first? Who's leaving at 4:30? All right, Julia. So right now, Julia, I'm going to jump in with a question for you. And let's see. And I want you all just to relax. Let your hair down. I'm letting my hair down metaphorically because you already know I don't have any. But we're going to have a good time talking about and engaging so that our listeners can get a full understanding of what's happening in our county and our cities. Because if we can admit, many people are uninformed because they're not close to the pain. So we're going to bring the pain to them that will allow them to listen and be compassionate and want to get involved. All right, Julia, we're going to peel back the face of girls in the education system as you assist schools as they seek to defund the police in San Jose schools. Let's talk about, Julia, the criminalization of girls in the system.
Sure. I don't think people realize that just one interaction with school discipline, so meaning one suspension, definitely an expulsion, increases the chances of a student interacting with the juvenile justice system exponentially. And when it happens younger, it's more likely to cause harm to those students. And we see thousands of girls of color, primarily, who are suspended, expelled, kicked out of class informally. And that honestly pushes them away from school in general and teaches them that school is not the place for them and school is not a safe place for them. So we fight against those discriminatory disciplinary practices on a daily basis. That's the work we've been doing for years and years. We also focus on special education work, again, for low-income families of color. And so when these protests started, the idea of removing police from schools was something near and dear to all of our hearts already. So we were excited to be able to do any of that work. As I mentioned, we've had 6-year-olds who were arrested and taken away by police. But much less serious than that, or much less obvious than that, we have students, it's not less serious, but we have students who on a daily basis are traumatized by seeing police in their schools. I don't think people realize, people who see police as authority figures and people of comfort, I don't think they realize that for huge numbers of our community, police don't signify that. And they actually signify trauma and fear for our students who walk around campus and have to see somebody like that on campus on a daily basis. So we've been working with some amazing community organizers, Silicon Valley Debug, Racial Schools Equity, Racial Equity in Schools for Alum Rock, and some other amazing groups who are focused on trying to take the money that we're spending on police officers, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars in this county, and put it back into the schools where it belongs and put it towards counselors and support for our youth who need that help. And especially now with COVID-19, we have students who don't have computers still and can't be doing their distance learning. So why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on police officers that don't actually support the students?
Yeah, those are great comments. I think, Julia, often we talk about missing the connection, connection of socially, economically deprived communities already being over-policed, right? So there's the trauma that they experience in their neighborhoods. Now we take that and we take that same trauma in a place where we are supposedly educating young minds to prepare them for the future, yet there are continued triggers that are constant in those spaces. So it is safe to say that those are not safe spaces, not at home and or at the school, that further perpetuate the challenge that students are already facing. And you mentioned the social divide. So let me ask this question, Jessica and Stephanie, and Jessica, I want you to jump in first. I want you to give a snapshot of how girls often encounter sexual violence. Julia, you mentioned mental health, how they encounter mental health challenges that intersect when they become swept up into human trafficking in that maze.
Hey, yeah, that's a really complex question, I just gotta say, but you know, I think where I would start is that, like, when we're talking about the criminalization of young folks in Santa Clara County, and specifically girls, and who's most disproportionately impacted by the system in Santa Clara County, Black girls are most disproportionately impacted, Latinx girls, and also LGBTQ, trans, and gender nonconforming young folks. And so when we talk about who's criminalized and why, we have to really address racism and white supremacy and how that has manifested in all of our systems, from schooling to policing to juvenile hall. And when we're looking at, we've been working at the Young Women's Freedom Center with young people that have been exploited and have had to survive on their own for 26 years. And what I know to be true is that our responses are based on the system's response, which we already know is criminalizing young folks of color. And so I think that we're very often criminalizing the young person for figuring out or having to survive their own criminalization, right? So young folks very often that are exploited are already systems involved, most often from foster care, which is very often one of the first, sometimes second systems, if you count poverty and public housing and stuff as some of those earlier systems. And one thing we also know is that our approach is, as we need to save and fix this young person, do not work. Young people are resistant to it. They leave. And so our approach is really focused in what does self-determination coupled with healing, coupled with economic opportunities actually mean? And so how do we begin to shift our ideas that these are broken young people that need to be saved, but they're actually whole young people that, while being exploited, also have skills and power and resilience and dreams. And so part of our work is really centered on shifting that narrative. And the last thing I wanted to say is that if, for the young people that we work with who have very often grown up from early ages in foster care and have felt harm from that system and have been pushed into receive mental health services from that system, then my response to mental health services is also something that harms me. Yes. And so part of our work around divestment and critical reinvestment is focused on how do we, the system was never set up ever to support the mental health, spiritual well-being of poor Black and brown young folks. It just wasn't. And so we as leaders in this county have a big job to do to push, like, let's take money from probation, from juvenile, from policing, and let's invest in community organizations like Debug and the center, and there's so many more to even name, and partner with the young people themselves to really recenter this conversation around what they want to need. So
absolutely. And Julie, I want you to stick a pin in that, because I want you to talk about how we look at some of the reallocation in the schools. But Jessica, Stephanie, often we don't think about young women relational to school to prison pipeline, and or the effects that they have. So Stephanie, can you speak of how police put these young ladies, these young girls, into the system as sex workers versus they put them in the system as sex workers versus looking at them as children and girls caught up on predators? I mean, all of this economic strife and depravity and lack of resources leads to young women becoming victims of predators. So can you speak to that, Stephanie?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. A little louder.
Sorry about that. Does that work now?
A little louder. Or bring your mic closer to your mouth.
Is that better?
There we go.
All right. Sorry, my other earphones, they ran out of battery. Yeah, oftentimes we see this. I mean, I've had cases in particular where some of my clients have actually been married to their traffickers. And sometimes it's very difficult to explain, not just to police, but also even to immigration when they have immigration purposes, that
yes, they were spouses, but there was an abuse of power here. This was just a child when they were exposed to the trafficking. Oftentimes there's a big age difference between the children, and so they know how to manipulate that in young children. And it's kind of like going through the weeds of trying to explain to someone, like, look, I know you have this preconception that they knew what they were getting into, or of course this is going to happen if you're going to marry someone at this young age. But you also have to, it's just going through the weeds with them and explaining to them, like, look, this is the kind of mentality that happens at this young age. You don't have the mentality of a 20 or 30-year-old when you're 16. It really takes an effort of just breaking it down for the police. Oftentimes they don't want to press charges. They don't. I feel very lucky, at least in our work that we do, that the VA is very understanding towards the immigrant community and especially towards the trafficking community. But it does make an effort also. It does take an effort to explain the situation to them as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. And Julia, and before we, Pratima, I want you to get ready to set up your slides because I want you to give us the overview of your work. So Stephanie, give us some insight in relationship to what Jessica said and what Stephanie just said around this mental health and how we could reimagine reallocating some of this money that's used for policing on campus that causes triggers that does not promote health and growth and wellness and identify the source of the problem. What are some of your ideas or thoughts or work around that?
Me, right?
Yes, Julia.
Okay.
I probably said Stephanie, but I meant Julia. We're like the Brady Bunch.
Totally fine.
I'm jet lagged. I'm trying to work it all out. But yes, Julia.
So, there's an idea of something called restorative justice, which a lot of schools will sort of speak about, but most schools in our county have not been able to practice yet in any meaningful way. And restorative justice is about finding the root of the issues and helping support youth through those. And instead of sending them out of the school, keeping them in the school and trying to heal from that point. Because you can send them out of the school, but they're still part of the community. And they still have all of those friends, and all the other students see what happens when the student gets sent out of the school, and that doesn't help anybody. It actually just shows them, if you make a mistake, we're not there for you anymore, and you can't come back here. I think a lot of people don't realize that when students are expelled, it can take years and can almost be impossible for them to get back into their school of origin. So I think restorative justice is one of the key factors, which a lot of our schools don't do. Most of our schools in the county don't do, and a lot of our schools don't have the funding to do. The other thing is a lot of schools and school districts and policies put just enormous pressure on teachers to just try harder and work more with the students. And our teachers are already working very hard, and they need funding, and the schools need more funding for extra support. There are millions of students in this country who have cops on campus and no counselors. These are students who have, as Jessica was noting, a lot of our students have been through foster care, which is traumatizing innately. They have lived through things in their own lives, and then they bring that to school. And then they have continued trauma at school through police or through having their needs go unmet for years. Bullying, there are so many things that can traumatize students at school, and our schools are unable to support them with any kind of counseling or support or almost anything, especially our lower income schools on the east side and in South County. They don't have counselors on campus, many of them, especially for our elementary schools. So that would be my ideal for all of this money that they're spending on having police officers on campus, which just criminalizes our kids and traumatizes them more. I would be hopeful for more restorative justice and more counseling.
Great, great points. And Jen, in the back office, can you put some information in the chat box about schools and communities first and the type of money that it would bring to support some of the issues or options of services that Julia is talking about? And viewers and listeners, if you don't know about schools and communities first, just imagine the opportunity of having Julia have the budget and purse strings for all of the schools, and her being able to eliminate policing on campus and using those funds for restorative justice, getting at the root causes. And sometimes people say that takes too much work. Well, we are in a situation in COVID-19, COVID-45, where doggone it, if you're not going to work, we're going to have much of the same and nothing's going to be gained. So the ideas that you're lifting up, Julia, coupled with our ability to vote, have understanding of what passing schools and communities first can do post-COVID for our young ladies in the schools is a really big deal. So let's make a quick shift. Since we talk about policies, and we have a policy expert that works on creating policy seen through the lens of gender and equity, particularly that of women. So Pratima, talk to us. Won't you share your slides with us, give us an update, and we'll take a deep dive. And Julia, if you have to leave, we love you, we thank you, and thank you for the time that you've spent with us today.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. And can you see my slide deck? I want to say that we at the Office of Women's Policy are incredibly lucky that the work that we do is rooted in social justice, and yet it's the work that's done on the administrative side of the county. In the words of Government Alliance on Race Equity, which is a cohort that I joined 2 years ago, when I took over this role, my hat is really that of a bureau activist. I'm a bureaucrat, but working on social justice activism. And so for us at the Office of Women's Policy, our work around, this is the division, and there are various partners in the division that intersectionally work on issues that impact marginalized communities, on work that needs to be done to make sure that everybody in our county is set up to thrive in an equitable manner, which means meeting the needs of the people where the people are at. And I really want to begin by talking about our adult justice work with women. And I will say this, there are very few opportunities that people like I have to do this work wearing the system hat. And I'll tell you what happened way back when the Office of Women's Policy started going to the women's jail in the county 2 times a month. We still do for the last decade or so. One of the things we realized is that all of the programming was just mirroring what was happening in the men's side. And then people wonder, why recidivism, right? Recidivism because you're not meeting people where they're at. And I would say that currently, besides our jail monitoring program, we have 3 other big pieces that we are working on with other system partners. The gender responsive opportunities for women really came out of our work with the Association for Justice Involved Women, that is a national association. For the first time under the leadership of Office of Women's Policy, we brought the conference to California and Santa Clara County. For 17 years, this conference has been happening nationwide, but we brought it to our communities for the first time in 2017. And one of the pieces that we really honed on was what is it that we are providing as a network of support for our justice impacted women when they exit our county jails. And from there, we also, I'll talk in a minute about our work with juvenile girls and gender nonconforming youth, but we also set up a work group along with probation to look at what is it that we're doing to set up women in the justice system to succeed. You know, a litany of programs is not going to, you know, Jessica began by saying, you just have a series of things that you give and say, do it. That's not how people are set up to succeed. And I also want to touch upon the fact that we have also started to work with our probation on transitional age youth. And this has happened because of 2 reasons. When we are going into the adult women's jail, the number of women who are below the age of 35 is exponentially high. And the number of women who are below the age of 35 who report to us that they have been system impacted as young women is even higher. And so we realized that there are two pieces we have to pick up. What is happening with our girls in our system and what's happening to transitional age youth. If there is a group that I worry about all the time, it is our transitional age youth, because they're really trying to balance two systems and nobody knows what to do. And I really want to say that probation reached out to us specifically because they said, as they're building a diversion program for transitional age youth, they would like to instill the gender responsive component as they're building it. So hopefully we are making some strides. I can't promise all strides that we need to. And as system, I'm here to learn and listen. So I do want to talk quickly about one big project that I took over, that I created when I took over the Office of Women's Policy as the director. That is to get to zero incarceration of girls. As we speak, today's statistic is 3 girls. All of them are in the juvenile hall facility, and that is it. In 2018, we started with about 20 girls. And the work that has happened to try to get to zero would not have happened without the creation of the Juvenile Justice Gender Responsive Task Force, which is a collaborative effort of community and system partners. Along with juvenile probation and the juvenile court, Office of Women's Policy monthly brings together community-based organizations and system partners that are providing services to our juveniles in the ranch, in the hall, as well as those who are out in the community but still considered system impacted. One of the things that we were fortunate to do was to reach out for technical assistance from Vera Institute of Justice. In 2018, they put together a request for proposals nationally for jurisdictions aiming to get to zero incarceration of girls. And they said, we'll help you with technical assistance. And I'm honored to say we're one of 5 counties that got picked in the nation to get to zero incarceration. What is the goal? The goal is to align systems. If you read about zero incarceration of girls nationally, there are 2 approaches, saying that you're going to close juvenile hall or lining up restorative justice. Julia talked about restorative justice. Jessica talked about healing and self-identity. Those are pieces that are rooted in restorative justice. What is our core value? Who am I? And why do I have to belong in this system as me, not as someone else's idea of me? And so with Vera Institute of Justice, we're looking at the systems that impact at every stage for a young person and a transgender non-conforming youth, because we also see in Santa Clara County that there is an over-reliance of the binary. And I began with our Office of LGBTQ Affairs being part of the Division of Equity and Social Justice. Intersectionally, with their help, we've been able to instill the SOGI data collection tool, which is sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, so that we really meet people where they're at. Finally, we talked, as I was listening to a lot about investment. And I want to say that what I'm going to give you as numbers is very, very little. There's a lot more we can do. But we're honored at the Office of Women's Policy to have been one of the first cohort recipients of the Youth Reinvestment Grant from the Board of State and Community Corrections. Along with Young Women's Freedom Center, Jessica Nolan, we have a $1 million grant to work purely on diversion, right? Nothing behind bars, everything out in the community, where our youth are. And we're hoping that we are aligning systems so that one day we take away the option of incarceration completely from the table. Because when I talk about this work, what I like to say is, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When we have prison as an option for our young people, we know that the knee-jerk reaction is to put them behind bars. And hopefully with our work, we will create a system that's gender responsive and gender informed, that aligns both adult and juvenile justice systems in a restorative manner. So I'll stop there and open it up.
That's a lot of great information. And I want Jessica to speak to this zero incarceration, but I want to jump back up to Stephanie to talk about these options for the young girls. We talked about predatory individuals that exploit them, but let's talk about them transitioning out of programs that make them all the more vulnerable. Can you speak to that, Stephanie?
Specify a little bit.
So we, in Fatima's presentation, she spoke about how young girls transition out of programs. It could be foster care or other programs. Though those type of programs where they age out and there's no safety net make them more vulnerable to sexual trafficking and being exposed.
Absolutely. We see this a lot, both with our children. No, you can't hear me? Sorry. Is that better?
There we go. Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So we see this a lot with both our children who were born in this country and also children who were brought here from other countries. Unfortunately, both face different types of challenges. I was incredibly moved to see Fatima's goals of zero incarceration of girls. I absolutely fully support that. Incarceration is not the answer for our youth in any way. And at least for the children that we see from other countries, that kind of impact can just absolutely destroy any chances they may have in the future for seeking immigration help or, seeking help from with family courts as well. When children are just thrown out of a system where they go from having full support, housing, food provided for them, sadly, when they age out, so when they turn as soon as they turn 18, all those benefits go away. It's important we always work with other organizations in the area to let them know that they do have rights. There are programs through the foster care system where they can receive certain benefits at the age of 24, 26, I believe. If Julia was here, she would know the exact age. Is that better? No? Somewhat? Okay, hold on. Is that better? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So there are organizations such as, if Julia was here, we would talk about this. They know a little bit more, but there are programs for our foster children where they can continue to receive benefits up until their age of 24 or 26. So we usually try to get them in touch with these other organizations in our area to let them know, you're not forgotten. There are people who do care about you. There are all these opportunities for you available. The first thing we ask is just come through the door, come for a consultation. This is a guilt-free, no judgment zone. We will talk to you. We will tell you your options. And if we can't answer your options, we'll provide you someone who can.
Yes. Excellent. And we'll come back to you because I have so many more questions. But yes, I want you to talk about the presentation that Fatima just gave, particularly the zero incarceration and your experience and your goals around that. You're muted. Our favorite thing to say with Zoom, you're muted.
I always have that issue 20 times a day, sorry. Gosh, so we were super excited to come and partner on this initiative. I think that, like I said, we've been around for 26 years. We've developed a model where for the most part led by directly impacted folks that have grown up in systems, grown up on the streets, and our recidivism rates are very low. And we work with folks to change the policies that keep women and girls stuck in cycles of violence, incarceration, and poverty. So we believe we can get to zero. And the way we get there is through centering the voices of young people, listening to them, partnering with them, and developing I don't even want to say developing because communities have the answer, resourcing communities. And so this diversion program is really we meet young people where they're at. So we're in juvenile hall, we're in the ranch, we're in the neighborhoods. We have other young people reaching out to them. All of our programs are grounded in economic opportunities. Starting this year, our minimum, we will be hiring 10 young people this year, starting wages $18 an hour. And I know for even my own self, when I first came to the Young Women's Freedom Center after being incarcerated 17 times and growing up on the streets, like nobody told me to stop doing what I was doing, which was, survival sex work and selling drugs. But I made double minimum wage, and I was in a community of my peers, and I was told my voice mattered, and I had decision-making power and agency and support. And at the Young Women's Freedom Center, we've worked with 36,000 young people, and I've been such privileged to be a part of the organization for 20 years. And so what I see is young people that were at the center as youth, and they were young people that everybody thought wouldn't make it, are, government officials, running foundations, elected officials, and met much more. And they're carrying the values of creating a more just world for everyone. So we believe we can get there. And we just graduated our first cohort just a few weeks ago of young people, all justice involved. um, I won't talk too long, but the work that they're doing when we listen to them, every young person I've ever talked to says, I don't need more therapy. I need a job. So what would actually happen if we created more economic opportunities where young people could get paid, have meaningful employment, and what if we valued their expertise, right? If we're um, realizing the solutions we have don't work, and we listen to them the right way. When young people come to us, they'll often say, I want to be a probation officer, I want to be a social worker, I want to have a group home. And to me, when I hear that, that is because I will bring humanity to this. I will see these young people. I will love them. And so and as we're creating opportunities and they're seeing themselves as being able to be so much, that there's just this uh, it's just this transformation that happens. So we really believe we can get there, and our work is hiring and training them to be the ones to lead us in the county to these different solutions. So
you said a whole lot. I wish that everyone knew your story. And Stephanie, my next question is, how do we create more Jessicas? How do we extract? I mean, she just said when the young folks said they don't want more therapy, give me a job. And I don't know why we missed this idea of restorative justice. Getting at the root of everything is our policies. We'll call them what they are, racist policies that have negative effects, that create inequity within communities, that have that cause social economic issues. The school to prison pipeline is a direct correlation. So I want to scream sometimes, why can't electeds and those powers that be see that correlation and really look at restorative justice as the answer, and not more policing and not more things that cause triggers that create and push people over the edge in mental health. But anyway, I digress. Stephanie, how do we create more Jessicas? Because to know her story, which I know you know her story, and to see how amazing she is and how contextual she is and connected to the pain, closest to the people that have experienced, how do we shift that paradigm and give individuals a hope, particularly those who are in the need extracting from sex trafficking?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of what Jessica said resonated so much in what I hear from my clients. I mean, sometimes it's very hard for them to get, work that's not within sex work, when it's like, I can't feed my family because I can't get paid the same amount that I did for, like, just working an honest, normal job, when, I used to make this much money and I could feed my kids, provide for my family. I think the answer is investing more in the community, getting more outreach out there. I mean, a lot of the times people who come to us, they find out through family, friends, or even some of our outreach programs that we do on the weekends. But I mean, if we had more people, the more outreach that we can do, I think it would absolutely just change the narrative, and it would make people realize, oh, I get it now. Like, I see not everybody is going through the same problems as me. Like, their problems can be a little different, and it kind of opens their mind to see not everyone's like me. You know, I can make a change. I can do something about this situation. And I think just investing more in our local programs and getting more interorganization correlation programs like this, where we get the narrative talking, I think that would make a bigger difference.
Absolutely. So Pratima, you have this great plan and policies, but do you feel that policies alone are the answer, or what more could you add relation to the stories that we're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Reverend, and I'll tell you why. Because honestly, we have to acknowledge that the system alone is not efficient, because the system has answers that they think the community needs. We need to meet the community where they're at. One of the reasons that our office was fortunate enough to bring Young Women's Freedom Center to Santa Clara County for was because the community showed up to the Board of Supervisors during the 2017 hearings that the board had on impacts that the community is facing because of the changing political climate. The Board of Supervisors approved a seed grant for $50,000 to work purely on restorative justice models. And we were honored to have been able to partner with Young Women's Freedom Center, because nationally the rate of recidivism through Young Women's Freedom Center programming was over 75%. To us, what that meant was what was happening, the sauce that Jessica's brewing is working. And we have to, you know, as somebody who said, hire smart people and get out of the way. To me, bringing community in when the community has answers is important, because we can legislate till the cows go home. And I'll say this because I was on the ground litigator, much like Stephanie, much like Julia. I worked as a legal aid lawyer for over 15 years throughout the state of California. And one of the pieces that I learned every single day was the courage that my clients had in coming to us and telling us that this is what we need from you. And what was the broken piece? The broken piece was the systemic response was not aligned with the needs of the community. And so I challenge each one of you to continue this dialogue so that we as a system can align what we can do with what the community needs. Who thought of gender responsive services? If you heard what Jessica said, the impact that is made when somebody with a lived experience says, wait a minute, let me tell you what I need. And the outcomes that are achieved when we actually listen to the person who tells you, let me tell you what I need. That's the combination, because otherwise we as a system will keep on spinning our wheels in the same spot. And Office of Women's Policy is here to say, we will move this van forward. We need to be part of this village that's here today.
Man, that is an amazing share. I mean, I'm really appreciating the dialogue. And Pratima, I hear you when you say we must listen. Jessica said it. Stephanie said it. We have to listen. It takes moral courage, for stakeholders to do things that are contrary to the self-interest of things that are capitalistic, that create and promote what they call wealth. But if we listen, we become not anti-capitalistic, but we become advocates to make sure that as we grow, we are listening to those who are most impacted. Because there's an author, and I can't remember off the top of my head, But he says, when we listen to the most impacted, when we listen to the poor, we're closer to the truth, right? We listen to everyone because all perspectives are important. So I want to close this out by saying thank you, but I want to ask each one of you a question, and I'll start with Jessica. What do the people, the powers that be, the elected, those who can make decisions, what do they need to hear from your community? And what are they missing? What are they missing and what do they need to hear? Our favorite thing to say. You're muted.
Sorry. I think we could always, I could totally write a book, but I think right now what our main point is the approaches that we've been taking are super siloed to policy, to systems reform, abolition, wherever you sit on the spectrum. Even when we're talking about, the exploitation of girls, for example, like all of it. And we need to begin to think about policy and communities as a whole and people as whole. And it's complex. We're dealing with 400 plus years of criminalization and under capitalism and racism in our country, and the solutions are not simple. And so for us, when we're looking at, the decriminalization of girls and trans and gender nonconforming young folks, we are the Young Women's Freedom Center. So we are at the intersection of all of these issues. And what we know is it's so important, especially right now, that we take the complexity and go deeper with it. And I think I just had to say this point before I get off, is when we're talking about exploited girls, we have to talk about who it is, right? And who the exploiters are, because folks have a false narrative that it is, exploited girl is a young white girl with blonde hair and blue eyes that's being ripped out of her home in the middle of the night by an old white man with a van. And that's not what's happening. And it's the folks we work with, it's mostly Black girls and young girls of color who have grown up in poverty, and their exploiters are also very often young men of color who have not had any economic opportunities. And that's who we're sending to prison with very racist laws. And so we have to dig into that complexity, especially in this moment when we're trying to really combat white supremacy and over policing and who those laws were set up for. So we want to keep all young people safe, and we know that we have to be addressing a broad array of complex issues through complex policy, communications, narrative shift, organizing, programming, and we got to do it all simultaneously.
Yeah, and together, right?
And together.
The messy proposition. Everyone, they're going to have to put on their waders because it's deep.
It's deep.
Messy. It's smelly. But this is not for the faint of heart. That's why we need individuals like you, but we have to do it together. We must listen together and collectively move together so that we have capacity and power. Thank you, Jessica. Stephanie, what's missing and what do we need to hear from your young ladies?
I would say, you need to listen to your community as a whole, not just the people who are directly involved in politics, but your people of color, your immigrant community, the people who sustain this whole community as a whole. And, it's very easy when you're thinking of budgets. So yes, just $1 million to this, or let's just cut the budget in half. But when you're doing your budgeting, you need to realize you're investing in a community for the future. These are the girls, like Jessica said, will be your social workers for your future communities. These are going to be your litigators, like Fatima. I remember she was a killer in court, and I mean, I used to intern with her, so it really makes a difference. And you may not see it now, but 10, 20 years from now, you will see that impact. And I think it's important to remember that your actions today will have reactions in the future. So make it positive, make it a community that you'll be proud of 10, 20 years ago from now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you for joining us. Protima, policy.
That's a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
You pointed out, Reverend, the word listen. And I'm here to ask each one of you to come to where the government is and tell us what we need to listen. Participate in creating policies that will truly uplift everyone, not just the squeaky wheels that manage to come and participate in what the government needs to do. My job is to support the work that's needed to uplift marginalized communities. The Division of Equity and Social Justice was established in 2019 with a specific intention to form a collaborative effort for intersectional work. In the work that the Office of Women's Policy does, in representing 1/2 of our population, we have immigrant women, we have gender nonconforming individuals, we have limited English proficient individuals, we have disabled women, and on and on and on. And I need to hear from every single one of you, because the work that we need to do cannot happen without partnership with community. I began by saying, I am honored to be where community is, to be here with each one of you, because often that's the space that we're missing at. And we need to make a better effort, and we will, but together, as you said, together we'll make this. I do want to make sure that everybody remembers we're in the middle of our census. If you haven't already, please fill out the census forms. Why? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're seeing what the social determinants of health is doing to negatively impact our communities of color during a health pandemic. If we don't get counted, then there won't be dollars that we need to invest and reinvest in our community. And finally, our ability to change and impact policy stems from our participation in the democratic system. We need to show up to vote. Thank you.
Protima, I'm going to sign you up because I was going to read your note from the Santa Clara County Office of Women's Policy around the census. I'm going to read that. You did a great job of voter engagement. We're going to be voting by mail. So October, we're at 98 days to the general election. So we must get registered. And PACT and our organizers are doing some amazing work. So if you're interested, send us a message. But I want to read this. Protima let us in. It says, the census allows for adequate funding for resources that serve women at higher rates than any other population. The areas they serve, childcare, housing assistance, healthcare, student loans, etc. Filling out the census is crucial to support women and other vulnerable populations. Representation matters significantly in how much money is spent serving vulnerable populations. Being from the east side of San Jose, this is someone speaking, not me speaking, a woman speaking, filling out the census is important to me so that my immigrant family's needs can be met along with my community. We can support the Santa Clara County Census in their outreach efforts to ensure all women and vulnerable populations are counted for and receive adequate resources to thrive. This is the OWP New American Fellow, Mariana. So absolutely, women, this is about making sure that our young girls' voices are heard. Now, we are getting into a campaign that we want you, and if you're an elected and you're listening today, the theme is listening to what? Our young women, our young gender specific, our young transgender, our most vulnerable, that are most impacted by COVID-19, and should I say COVID-45. We're in a very pervasive situation where if we do not respond together as a people, our young girls who are the most vulnerable have much to lose. And we who sit back and say nothing, who stay out of good trouble, are complicit in this process. And we are just as guilty. So let's write our electeds at the county and our various cities, San Jose and all of the other cities within the county of Santa Clara. And let's begin to become engaged and let our voices be heard. And if they don't want to listen, we will force them to listen. So that's what we do. That's what happens when we come together. So I want to thank Julia, who had to leave early. Jessica, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Stephanie and Protima, we really appreciate your voices. And again, if you have information, put it in the chat box. Those who are watching live on Facebook and on Zoom, we want you to follow this work. We just don't want you to listen to this Justice Project. But again, during this COVID period, our most vulnerable, our most poor are the most impacted. And we who have power, which we all have power, let's exert that by registering to vote, completing our census, writing our electeds, and getting behind these women in the work that they're doing. So I want to thank you again. I'm Reverend Ray, and I want to thank you for joining us at the Justice Project as we seek to make Santa Clara County and Silicon Valley and all the cities within more equitable and just for girls, for women, and for all. Remember, Black Lives Matters. No life matters unless Black Lives Matter. And you must understand that that's clothed in policies that Jessica talked about, racial bias. So it's just not about Black people, but it's our historic oppression that's wrapped in the oppression of a people that's used against our transgender and our gender and non-specific and non-binary. So we must awaken and we must think and we must learn. So thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Same time, same place. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. May you all be blessed.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.